another installment of the Racial Justice Training Calendar and Continuous Improvement Initiative. I'm really excited today because we're going to have a couple of youth join us, and we're going to do what I like to call a learning panel. And so the way that we're structuring this panel today will be explained to you as well. We'll get a chance to learn a little bit, hear from young folks, and you'll get a chance to talk to them about why it's so important to engage young folks in collective action. We recognize that with the AmeriCorps, your community engagement related to resistance movements is very defined. We want to make sure that we keep that in mind as well, but we also want to give you an opportunity to find how you can do this work with young folks and even in your personal lives as well. I am super excited today. I love helping young people help community and being led by young people as they serve our community as well. And so thank you all for joining us. This is a 2-hour training. We'll be going until 11 o'clock afterward next week. You'll be receiving your reflection journal, which will have even more activities and things of that nature in there. And then do an application video talking about what are ways you can actually apply this content immediately. All right, y'all. So let's get started. I'm going to kick it over to Kyle to see if he has anything, any announcement he wants to make.
I just want to say welcome everybody once again and thank Jeremy for hosting this training. We're looking forward to the event. And if you have any questions, just please reach out to me in the chat. And we're just so happy that you all are joining us on this next session. And then we have 2 more coming up in May.
Perfect. Let's get started. So the first thing is all of these trainings are being recorded. And so we want to make sure we don't take any screenshots of the content because it is proprietary. And then I want to move into the community culture. These are things we outline every month just to make sure we're reminded of how we want to engage with each other today. It's going to be especially important as we hear young folks share strategically about how they've been engaging in community and in their organizations. The first thing is, I like to say, if you see something, here's some of the things you ought to be doing, okay? So sometimes we're having conversations and you may feel a really big need to be really positive, right? You may say stuff like, it's not that bad, there's always a silver lining, there's still hope, something like that. And I like to say sometimes you can come off as a motivational monster, trying to scare away all of the negativity in the space because you associate positivity with safety. I want to remind you that having heavier emotions and really expressing yourself in a way that doesn't always feel like it's positive is actually a sign that the space can be safe enough for folks to tell the truth. So whenever you feel like it's not that bad, or there's always a silver lining, I want you to ask the question, for who? For whom is it not that bad? Who sees the silver lining? For who still sees that hope? And remind yourself that sometimes you're projecting your worldview or your feelings on other folks instead of reassuring them that the way that they feel is okay. And that sometimes you have to embrace those. So I want to encourage us that when we're feeling toxically positive and not making room for folks to be transparent about their true feelings, I want you to honor the uncomfortable, tense, and emotional moments. The next thing is there may be some space for some cringy comments, okay? This could be someone saying, you know what, I want to say something, but I also don't want to seem biased or racist or ignorant. What I want to do is create a space where folks can make those cringy comments, but with the caveats, right? We want to make sure that we're not harming folks, and we want to make sure that when we have harmed folks, we learned this 2 sessions ago, that we should always be willing to repair that harm. And so your goal is not to make cringy comments for the sake of just saying something. Your goal is to make those comments for the hope that you can think out loud and learn from somebody else. And so when you're doing that, try not to justify, right? So just ask that question, share that thought, and make that comment. And don't try to rationalize it as well. It's going to be important to remember that when you justify things all the time, it makes it seem like you actually believe what you're saying. And we're not here to judge you for how you view the world. We're here to create a safe community where everybody can reshape and unlearn some of the things that we have learned that can cause harm to other people. All right? Just a few more with our community culture, and I'm very much aware that I'm reminding you of this because we do this every month. I also want to talk about identity mining, demanding people with marginalized identities share out of curiosity. Sometimes you may see a person who fits a demographic, and you're going, "Ooh, I want to hear from Jeremy because we're talking about Black males." Well, that's not always the safest thing to do. My silence could be me reflecting, managing some of my trigger points, or just processing the conversation. So I want you all, instead of doing some of that identity mining, to just think out loud, offer up a thought, and ask folks to give you feedback or help you learn something new or differently. That's a lot more safer approach and allows folks who want to be silent to do that. And the last thing is obviously power dynamics. People with certain roles, titles, identities, shifting environments in their favor. None of that. We want to practice cancel culture. Someone recently just called it accountability culture. I love that term. And so calling out and rejecting dominating ideas, expectations, dynamics, and situations explicitly. Just saying, listen, y'all, we're coming here and we want to eliminate all the power dynamics that can create an unsafe environment. Any questions or thoughts about the community culture? All right, hopefully everybody understands it and we're willing to abide by it. Can someone read the description for today's training?
I can read it. Okay, description. Nothing for us without us. Introduces participants to best practices for engaging youth as leaders in racial justice initiatives. Youth and adults explore strategies for creating campaign momentum, developing effective teams, and building tactics that produce long-term change. This training exposes participants to multiple evidence-based organizing principles, leadership frameworks, and youth engagement methods.
Thank you, I appreciate you. And is that Malaya?
Yep, that is perfect.
Nice. So does anyone want to respond to this description and talk about what they appreciate or even talk about what they hope to gain today?
I have a question that I hope will be answered at the end of this training.
Okay.
A lot of times movements start with young people that are energetic and driven and have philosophies. But as they grow older, that seems to change. And the changes that they wanted to see when they were young, they don't exactly fight for as they grow older. And I wonder why that happens and if that's just always the way that it is.
That's a really good thought, Patty. We won't be covering that, the change in social justice issues based off of age and generations. We won't cover that particular piece, but that is a really good question, Patty. Many times when life changes and things shift and the world changes, issues change as well, and perspective on issues change as well. Someone once told me that 5 years, you should not see the world the same way that you saw it today, because you're always learning and unlearning, right? And so there is a context for what it means to evolve, but there is also the truth that we oftentimes live in an adultist world, in adult-centered spaces, which means that many times we buy into those adult-driven ideas that oftentimes cause young folks to be marginalized and their voices to be minimized, right? And so we have to do that work for ourselves to say, you know what, even though I'm an adult and I in a righteous way, I see the world differently. How can I make sure I center the lived realities of young people and recognize that their experiences and the way that they see the world is also valuable as well? So to kind of answer that, because we won't be going into it a lot, yeah, that's kind of my first thoughts about that.
Thank
Any others
you.
want to? Yeah, thank you. Any others want to respond? Talk about what they're looking forward to.
Some folks did write in the chat as well.
Oh, perfect. Okay, nice. So we got hear from that youth panel. We definitely will. Strategies to bring back to my youth committee, of course. Looking forward to hearing from the panel. Yep. Okay. Leadership frameworks that hopefully can translate into work with the Solidarity Action Committee. Thank you, Avery. Appreciate it. Perfect. Okay, so here's how it's going to go, y'all. Here's the framework for the day. I'm going to do a brief presentation, just talking about it, some of those things before we add the panel. The panel is actually going to answer a question that they've been introduced to already, and then you'll get a chance to offer some discussion as well, okay? So I'll give some information. The panel will take that information and that question at the end and really talk about it from their lived experience and their perspective. And then you all will get a chance to ask your questions directly to the panel as well. All right. Hopefully that makes sense to y'all. This how we're going to do it. It's called a learning panel. Let's get started. So this training is designed to do in three different sections: a base builder, team builders, and strategy builders. For each section, I'm going to present information and then ask the panelists a question based off of their perspective about how to build a base of young people supporters, how to build teams as they begin to do collective action, and then how to do strategy from their perspective as well. And then y'all will get a chance to talk to them. I'm going to move over and give the floor over to our youth panelists to introduce themselves. All right, who'd like to go first?
I'll go first.
Go first. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy, for having me be a part of this. My name is Yannis Rosario. I work for Leaders Igniting Transformation, aka LIT. I was born and raised in the south side of Milwaukee, and both my parents were born in Puerto Rico. Right after graduating high school, I entered a nonprofit organization, which placed me to work with LIT. 10 months later, I graduated and was hired as a full-time youth organizer with Leaders Igniting Transformation to work towards dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline within Milwaukee Public Schools. And ever since then, I've been doing work to engage youth and the community to be able to make systemic changes within the school district to help dismantle barriers that are set in our youth's everyday lives.
Yeah, thank you, Yannis. We'll have Mia next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mia Moore. I am a 15-year-old student who is, and I'm also a freshman class president at Rufus King International High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm very passionate about helping others and transforming my community. I'm also part of an organization called Urban Underground, which is a youth leadership organization that focuses on youth-led social justice campaigns in their areas of health, education, public safety, and youth justice reform. I'm also involved in pre-college programs such as People Program and Sponsor a Scholar. And I also have a passion for dance. Yeah, that's me.
That's what's up. All right, thank you, Mia. Thank you, Yannis, for showing up today. Let's get started, y'all. So the first thing I want to talk about is building a base, okay? Building a base. When we talk about youth organizing and or organizing in general, we're really talking about starting off with the collective of people who understand the issue, who are bought into the issue, and are willing to support it. Now, that support can look differently depending on how they want to engage and what the campaign looks like. But you can't do a campaign really around momentum building and make a huge impact if you don't first have a really good base of people. Can somebody read what a base builder does?
The ability to connect with the needs and interests of youth and engage them in the issues of the campaign. These organizers create easy to access physical and virtual spaces. They offer youth the opportunity to set the agenda and make decisions. Lastly, the base builder never leaves the presence of youth without making a clear and direct ask. Youth need to know what to expect now, next, and later.
Yes. So when we talk about young folks, y'all, we're talking about the ability to not only connect with them, but also help them understand what's going to be happening now, next, and later. Many times in campaigns, there is an assumption that people automatically get it. Obviously, the world needs to work toward more clean water. Or obviously, global warming is an issue. Doug, can't you see the videos? Police brutality is real, right? I've come across folks who didn't even realize police brutality was the way it was until after a police officer got shot, right? For what seemingly was to them no reason. Then they were talking about, oh, I get it. People do get shot or people are actually mad. Wow, this is a thing. And so some folks' worldview and life experiences have allowed them through their power and privilege to not even recognize the issues that exist, right? And so when we talk about that, we can't just assume that young people will be bought in, understand, or that they can automatically see the vision ahead. The base builder is someone who is able to lay that framework out while at the same time recruiting young folks to be a part of that in any way that makes them feel comfortable. And so we do have some base builder truths, all right? Here's some 3 truths if you're taking notes. Youth must identify with the base builder and see them as someone who can empathize with their current experiences. We kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier, and that sometimes when we become adults, we start doing the adulting thing, and then sometimes we begin to embrace or internalize adultism, and we start seeing young people as either a problem, a threat. And there's a lot of negative association with either youth and or youth culture. Don't like the music that they listen to, don't like the way that they dress. And all of those things can cloud our understanding of who youth are. And those things can become stereotypical. And we want to make sure that as that base builder, that is someone who's able to see young folks for who they are and actually look at the value of young people as well. It can be easier to recruit youth when we understand their relationships to the adults that they trust, they live with as well. And so it's going to be important to not just talk to young people, but also begin to talk to their family members if necessary, talk to their mentors if necessary, because those are the trusted adults they already are connected to. So not only is there a level of safety for the young people when they're always connected and adults in their lives are aware of what they're engaging in, but it's also a great avenue to get a better understanding of that young person as well. And then once a healthy relationship is established, the base builder finds more success helping youth engage in the campaign's goals. All right. So here are what I wanted to offer you all were some of those skills of base builders, right? Before we have the youth panelists come and talk about some things that they know as well. And so here's some of those skills of base builders, y'all. And what I want you to think about is, what are some of the skills you have that you're really good at, and which of these skills do you want to get better at, all right? So I want you to think in 2 terms. I'm good at this, I want to get better at that. One of the skills of a base builder is creating community events and meetings to discover issues youth care about. Okay, there is a lot of different ways you can do that online and in person, where you convene young folks and they're here for a specific thing, but it also can be used to get a better sense of what young folks are interested in and the issues that they care about. Publicizing information related to the cause via influencer pages, latest apps, and things of that nature. The base builder has to be able to educate and bring about awareness as well. Building trusted relationships with residents, business owners, and community leaders, and recruiting them to the cause. Base builders are really good networkers, folks who have connections across different sectors and can understand how to speak to different audiences. Tracking stories about how the issue has impacted youth and adults. There's nothing worse than sharing information either via social media or email or in person that's been outdated. If we've learned anything from the pandemic, we know that information shifts, changing, gets updated almost weekly sometimes. And so it's going to be important for that base builder to be up on what's happening most recently. And then engaging community through creative expression and non-traditional communication styles. This person may be really good at being able to throw a community event or do poetry and speak to audiences as well. The last piece before we bring up the panelists is I want to talk about engaging the base here. And the first thing I want to mention is that whenever you're recruiting someone or sharing your story about an issue, you want to connect to 3 different things. The emotion, right, that inspires you to commit action with urgency. When folks understand how their needs and values are being threatened, they will become invested in the campaign vision. Action. What are the steps we want young folks to take? And then the solutions. Hope is gained when youth understand how solutions will improve their lives and the lives of their peers. You need to believe that the solutions are achievable, okay? And that can go for youth and or adults, okay? All right. The next thing is supporters. So let's say you've packaged your message, you understand why it's emotionally charging, you've got that ask in there around the action, and you're looking at solutions, right? So, yep, we're upset about these things. We want to do these things because we want these outcomes. You're going to see folks show up in 3 different ways. Supporters, they may not show up to everything, right? But they will share your posts, maybe give a small amount or sign a petition. So we got supporters. We also have members, young folks who are actually willing to commit to long-term service, who will participate in the things that interest them. They're willing to attend events and share information when they have the time. And then we have leaders. Those are the ones who are actively committed to the goals of the campaign, right? They volunteer, plan events, make decisions, recruit new members. They champion causes and openly associate with the values of the organization. And so that messaging that we talked about has to be clear with that emotional point, the action point, and the solutions. And you're going to find that young folks, a mentor mindset, they vote with their feet. They're going to become supporters from a distance, or members for certain things, or even leaders across the organization. And today, who the panelists we're talking to today are definitely going to be some youth leaders. Okay, I want to get to that youth panel, and these are the two questions that I want to ask you all. Who introduced you to the organization for which you are participating? Why did you join? And lastly, in your experience, what is the most effective way to engage youth in service work and civic engagement? All right, young folks, talk to us.
I'll go first. So who introduced me to the organization? So I was born into Urban Underground. My mother is the founder of Urban. So with that, I was just brought up into Urban. Not that I was forced into doing Urban, but just seeing that the work Urban does just lit a fire in me. And I became really passionate about the work that Urban does. So just being able to see just youth advocate for the things, using their voice to advocate for the things that they want to change, just made me really want to participate in Urban. And then in my experience, the most effective way to engage youth in service work and civic engagement is to focus on the interests of the youth. Like, what are they interested in, and how you can use their interest, and then, how you can use their interest in the process of teaching them and informing them on the cause or that certain topic, and how you can educate them on how it impacts them. That's what I should say.
Okay, so for me, you talked before I get over to the Panelists. You talked about being born into Urban Underground, and you've had parents who really demonstrated what that civic engagement looked like. Can you talk a little bit more about, was there ever a moment or a demonstration or a thing that happened that made you go, whoa, I have to be a part of this, or whoa, I'm really proud to already be born into this?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, like, when I was younger, I saw like just all the youth and just my mom speaking to the causes and just organizing, basically creating things like posters, protests. I went to a lot of protests and demonstrations when I was younger. So just seeing that visual just really sparked me, just gave me a passion for that. So yeah.
That's good stuff. All right, and Annalise?
Hello. So for the first question, I got introduced with LIT, well, initially because I volunteered for these events that would happen. It's called Hue the Hood events, and they were tabling at that event, and someone had came up to me to talk to me about what they were about. But then coincidentally, a couple months later, I had gotten into the Public Allies program, which they had placed me to work with LIT. So that's how I got introduced and started working and participating with LIT. And why did I join these organizations / causes? Well, when I was in high school, I always knew it felt like there was something not right with society and just couldn't put it into words or explain it. And I really wanted to learn more the causes of these issues. And I also wanted to be more involved in the community because something that Butler Ajaman, who's the one that runs Hue the Hoods, he had talked at my school and said, if you're always going to be talking about the issues but not doing anything, then just don't say anything at all.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, I'm like, dang, okay, well, I guess I gotta start doing something. So that's what got me to start volunteering to events and in the community overall. And then honestly, once I watched the documentary 13th Amendment in high school, I watched it like 5 times during high school, made it really like blew my mind, and really helped me understand the causes of a lot of the issues that I couldn't put into words. So that is the more so why I am involved in this. And for the second question is, okay, so in my experience, the most effective way to engage youth in service work and or civic engagement is very similar to what Mia said, is to find out their interests and actually build a relationship with them.
That's good.
One thing that I find in nonprofit organizations is due to the fact that we heavily rely on funding.
Yeah.
We heavily rely on funders with a lot of money. That really trickles down to having to meet certain metrics. And it really turns into organizers more worried about meeting those metrics than building those relationships and building that people power. So that really enables the nonprofit industrial complex. So I feel like the biggest thing is being genuine about the relationships that you're building with youth, because youth know when you're basically using them, when you basically just want something from them. Everyone knows that feeling. So, just like tomorrow, one of my members is having a very, very tough time through her personal life. So I'm gonna go take her out to eat. So it's just like, just actually building genuine relationships where there's like, once you want them to be civically engaged or in anything, they're quick to say yes. They're not even gonna hesitate because they already have that bond, that relationship, and that loyalty towards you and this work as well. So yeah.
Wow, Yanalise, you dropped a few bombs. I love this conversation between you and Mia happening right now. A few of the things that I really appreciate you saying was that one-on-one relationship. A lot of times in the nonprofit industrial complex, we find ourselves, like you said, looking for those outcomes. And that can create a different motive in trying to create real impact. Right. And so really helping young people recognize, yeah, not only do we need young people, but we value young people. And there's a big difference between being around somebody because you need them and being around somebody because you genuinely value them. That's dope. Okay, Mia, did you want to add anything? Is Yanalise sparking any ideas in your head right now?
That was a lot. That was powerful. That's long. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like, we can't just stand by and not like do anything about the causes and topics that we care about. Like, we have to put some forth to action for it. So I definitely love it.
Perfect. I'm going to open it up now to the audience here. Is there anybody who has a question for our youth panelists?
I have one question.
Go ahead, Ari.
So when you work for a nonprofit, do you have like other things that you do outside of the nonprofit that are like job related or career oriented that you do on top of the nonprofit, or is a nonprofit like what you do as your career, as your life goal kind of thing? Just because I know a lot of people, especially like my generation, a lot of us have like bills and like, debt that we have to pay back, student loans and stuff like that. So we're trying to do like career oriented stuff while also being socially justice aware or just aware in general. So like joining those orgs, sharing the stuff about orgs, like a lot of my friends are involved with orgs, but it's not their main thing. It's like, they do that for enjoyment because they actually enjoy organizing and things like that and helping the community, but it's not their main thing. Whereas with y'all, it kind of seems like it's the main thing. So I was wondering if you do have those like side things you do, or like truly you devote your time to the nonprofit and only the nonprofit.
Yeah, so for me, like my position in Urban Underground, I'm a youth intern. So Urban Underground provided me with that opportunity to get paid while also doing that work that I really enjoy doing. So I would just say try to find what you like and try to find people that are gonna like pay you for it. But also it's something that I enjoy and love doing. So that was just a blessing to be able to get an internship through Urban.
For me, it's my full-time position and career. I wouldn't be doing anything else. But before I started working in this full-time, I was already involved in doing other things. Like I said, I've volunteered throughout the summer a lot, like before graduating high school. And then since I was about 16 or 17 years old, I am a part of this youth advisory council that basically works to advocate for youth that has been in the system. So I'm currently the president of the local chapter and the vice president of the statewide board. So I don't know if that helps your question or not. Sorry.
That's good. No, great. Are there any other questions for our youth panelists?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So full disclosure, I'm a development director. So that's how I'm viewing this conversation. And I don't recall which of you made the comment about metrics and nonprofits building relationships based off of the metrics that they're trying to prove to their funding community. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts about, is there a role for, or obviously there is a role, but how can we engage youth, whether it's a youth advisory committee or something like that, to help us develop our metrics? Because I think, you know, among development professionals, we're always asking, are we measuring the right things? Is our needs statement actually what the community needs? So it's a reoccurring theme. And so I'm just interested to hear from the two of you as youth, is that what's the role of youth in helping us identify the need and figure out how to measure it?
Yeah, so I would say what's really important is actually putting youth in those leadership positions. So Mia had mentioned that she's an intern at Urban Underground, and I don't know exactly what that position entails, but for lit, we have a fellowship, and we have 6 high school fellows where we're paying them as well to actually learn how to become organizers. So they are doing this work with us, and we're not doing the work, you know, for them or like talking at them. They're talking with us. They're in these conversations. They know our goals. We are very explicit with them as to what goals we need to reach, and how we can go about that. But yeah, I would say I would really prioritize leadership I would really prioritize leadership development and political education, because once youth are informed in various levels, they know how to make the decision with adults. So
That's good, Annalise. And Mia, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say just funders need to find better ways to listen to youth so that they can allocate and put those dollars into things that the youth actually care about and just are interested in. So I would just, to answer the question.
That's good. It sounds like a lot of that is rooted in how close your ear is to the voices of young people in the first place. Many times, nonprofit sectors exist in a hierarchy. And so folks who are funding are a lot further away from the folks that are supposed to be impacted with the dollars. And one of the things that when we talk about strategic questioning is the question, should we be asking ourselves, should funders be closest to the community that they are trying to fund, right? Should they actually be going to those community events? Should they actually be engaging physically with those young folks they're trying to impact? And how much time would be necessary for them to do like the things that you all are saying, and hearing young people and shaping and crafting those particular questions and measurements in a way that actually reflects the needs of young people and their interests, right? So that's good. Hopefully that answers your question, Carolyn. That was a good one. All right, I got some stuff in the chat box, y'all. Lucas says this: as youth activists, do you find that there are additional barriers to your work that you wouldn't face as an adult? Do you think there's additional barriers to doing your work as a young person that you probably wouldn't face if you were an adult? Give you some time to think about it.
I can go. So basically, I face a lot of that for the simple fact that I started working straight after high school. I didn't even graduate college. So what's it called? That within itself, adultism is very, very big in this society. So one, what I've found a lot is that adults really don't have expectations on youth. So once a youth is performing at a level that is not to their expectation. They're like, oh, wow, you can do this. Like, wow, like they're, it's just like such a surprise to them. And that within itself is insulting. But what's it called? Something that I faced, like going in schools and actually trying to build relationships with other adults, is it obviously varies on the person. But one, people always want to know how old I am. Like, why? I don't know how that's going to make a difference in the relationship. But two, once like they find out that I've been doing this work straight out of high school, again, it's kind of like belittling my intelligence and what can I do. So they get to talking to me like they get to talking to me in ways that they wouldn't talk to their peers. And it's kind of that thing that white people do when they're talking to other people of color. They change up their tone real quick to talk to me at a level that they think I will understand. So yeah, and then another thing is like I would go into schools. I'm always authentic in being myself. So I would walk into school with jeans and a pair of tennis shoes. And I can't tell you how many times a teacher has tried to take away my phone while I was being in the school, tried to send me to the office because they thought I was a student, or even yelled at me because they thought I was a student, just walking around the hallways. What's it called? So yeah, it's just a lot of that, and also like learning how to code switch between adults. Because sometimes I have to meet with people that do work on a county level. So it's like, okay, I'm not about to wear jeans and some tennis shoes. I have to wear some slacks, a little blazer, so they can take me serious. So that's what I have to deal with personally.
Sheesh, Yannalee, so you just really took it to that adultism space seriously. There's so many layers you talked about, and it's almost like this weird gray area where folks have adult-related expectations, right? Did you go to college? Did you work a certain place? Do you have these things behind your name? And if you don't, you're saying you experienced that conversation shift and based off of that. And then when you show up in your regular everyday clothes and you're not assimilating to those professional things that are really rooted in white supremacy culture, you're saying folks can make you again on top of that, because not only do you appear young, but also they may not look at you in the same way as other professionals. Sheesh, that's real stuff right there. And so that intersection of youth and professionalism, especially as someone in your position, can be really tough to handle. Mia, what are you thinking related to that question? How can it be more difficult for young people to be engaged in this work that it may not be as difficult for adults?
I definitely agree with Yannalee said. It's a perception that youth cannot just perform at high levels. Like the bar is typically set low for us. So just on that standard, even when it comes to using your voice, teachers and adults just sometimes don't take me serious. And I don't know why that is, but I definitely agree like what Yannalee said. So.
And I got one more question in the chat box I want to get to here. How would you say that you engage folks in service work and civic engagement that initially may not want to be engaged? Are there certain platforms you target or outside groups? So how do you all really get the attention of people who may not want to be engaged initially?
I would definitely say social media. Social media is a huge platform, but also that comes with interest. So even using social media, for example, like TikTok, over the summer, we created TikToks to just inform people on voting and just getting them engaged and and exercising your right to vote. So I definitely would say social media, finding out their interest. Like we had a couple students from Rufus King that wanted to join Urban, like even though like they didn't know what work that we did, but just educating them on things that we do, and definitely finding out their interest and just pulling them in, because people can't care about the topics that you tell them unless they're not informed about it. So I definitely say inform them, educate them, and pull them in. Like even if they're not aware of the topic or not engaged in the topic, pull them in, educate them, bring them to events, things like that.
That's good, Mia. So one of the things I heard you talking about there is social media. And the truth is there's a lot of adults who are like, social media is not my thing. They're like, I don't know about no TikTok, no talking. They ain't trying to do no Instagramming. They love probably Facebook, right? But that may not be where the young people are. So me, if you could actually elaborate a little bit on adults and that social media thing, some of them really do assume that it's not necessary. And one of the things I always talk about is it is, right? The young folks oftentimes determine what's necessary for the future, okay? So if they're on social media, guess what? We're on social media. Can you talk a little bit more to the adults about the importance of social media before I hand it over to Yanalise?
Yes, so social media is important. Like everybody's on social media. You can connect and just pull different groups of people in. But the power of social media is just really powerful. Like there's a lot of people that you can reach, and just it's different platforms. Like many people may not be on one type of social media, but they're on the other. For example, like you said, Jeremy, Facebook, like many of the adults are on Facebook, but many of the young students are not on Facebook. Like we don't use Facebook that much. So just even it comes with that intergenerational learning. Like some things that we may know, the adults may not know, but some things that the adults may not know, we wait, did I say that right? We may
You
not.
got it right. Yeah, no, you're on the road.
But,
we know. Yep.
But yeah, social media is just a really huge platform, and it amplifies their causes as well. So yeah.
All right, Yanalise.
I would say for the ones that are difficult to engage, one is just like the reality of the fact is that we have to really understand history. In history, white supremacy has done absolutely everything in their power to miseducate us, to misinform us, to put us in these positions where we cannot thrive, where everyone is just focused on surviving. And that's just really how it is when we're working in Milwaukee public schools. So it's like folks are not everyone is going to be like, oh yeah, let me do this. This seems interesting. Because that's just, again, this is not the reality of it. But just like Mia said, if we're informing the youth and we're informing them on how this actually affects them and how it relates to them and how it affects their day-to-day lives from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, then they're more inclined to do something about it, because they're like, wow, like this is actually affecting me, and I'm the only one who can actually do something about it. So I would say just persistence on educating them, persistence on reaching out to them, persistence on building that relationship. Because again, not everyone is comfortable talking to someone the first time they ever meet someone. And something that I found too, especially throughout the pandemic, it's definitely existed before, but it's gotten worse because of the pandemic, is that quite frankly, youth have to deal with the mental health issues, and youth have to deal with anxiety, with depression and all of that. So you also have to keep that in mind when you are approaching a youth, and how to approach them, because some youth are extroverted and they have no problem having a conversation with you. Some youth are introverted, and you have to learn how to have that conversation, how to approach them. And that just takes observation on anything. Like you can just literally ask them like, oh, I don't watch anime, I don't know anything about that, but that's like the wave right now. A lot of youth love anime. So I just ask them like, oh, what's your favorite anime show? I don't know a clue about that, but they like, oh my gosh, this show on Netflix. And like that gets them to talking. And yeah, like I said, like everything doesn't have to be about the work that you're doing. It can be like literally just building a relationship to get them to want to commit to the work. So that's my answer to that one.
That's powerful. Everything doesn't have to always be about the work that you're doing. You even talked about anime. You reminded me, I talked to my nephew. I do a lot of work around mental health. And I found out from him, totally into anime, YouTube all day long, 16 years old. He tells me that they're talking about depression, schizophrenia, suicide, and anime. So now I'm thinking about ideas and where we can like bridge those connections between, okay, anime, young people, mental health must be a thing. So I love that, Annalise, that we have to also remember to build an authentic relationship with young people that is even outside of the issues, because we want to really impact folks' humanity. I love that. That's dope. Are there additional questions we have? You can even speak it through your microphone as well if you want to, for our youth panelists. Before we move into our second section, we're talking about building that base and those relationships. We're going to talk about teams after this. Any additional questions for our young people?
Yeah, I have one. Is there a major experience you've been a part of that has shown, how amazing young people are in their ability to really show up and radically change systems?
Okay, so I'll just answer this real quick. Recently was just the elections, April 6th, I believe. Please don't quote me on that. But there was just an election very recent. And our fellows and our youth, they were the ones really facilitating and monitoring our forums that we were having for the candidates, along with the state superintendent candidates as well. And in conclusion, again, like, they were the ones moderating everything. They were the ones who came up with their own questions, what they wanted in a school board member and all of that. But at the end, like, with having these forums and all of that stuff, they had endorsed our youth power agenda, which is an agenda to committing to bettering MPS and basically divesting from policing and investing in young people's future. And that was not easy at all to do. We had a lot of pushback the last couple of years of our youth power agenda. But since our youth were at the forefront of these conversations and these decisions and their wants and demands, they were able to have that relationship and have a good working relationship.
Powerful.
I'll say that.
Thank you.
I would say in the previous years, I have participated in a march called 50 Miles More. And that's where we marched through, I can't remember where it was, but we did a little bit over 50 miles, but that was a lot. But we stayed overnight in school buildings. And that protest was just surrounded around gun reform. So that was one experience that I've been in. Also, let's see, we organized a protest over the summer, Urban Underground did, surrounded by police brutality. And we made sure to highlight women, because women are often not really highlighted or shown in, when it comes to police brutality. So that was something else that I've had experience with. And then recently, we did a panel surrounding education, and we had adults and teachers sit on that panel as well as youth, and just to talk about like their experience with MPS and just reopening the schools and just going back and how they feel about going back in person.
That's powerful. So yeah, I mean, even with the adult piece and young folks going back to school, that could be a really great example of young people partnering with adults to make certain things happen, to influence certain things, and to educate certain folks. It's really powerful that you mentioned that, Mia, because in our next piece, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to build those youth and adult teams. And that framework around either gun reform or police brutality, or even divesting and in some aspects of policing to reinvest that into young folks, that's going to take some youth and adult partnership. That's going to take adults not just looking at young people or believing in young people, but actually taking action with young people. So let's jump on into that. And then we're going to have some questions for our youth panelists. This is good, y'all. I appreciate y'all's insight for sure. All right, y'all. So let's talk about team building. We reviewed base building, and there's going to be more of that content in your reflection journal. But for the team building, I want someone to read the description for that for me, please.
I can read. Team builders, the ability to understand the needs of youth, activate their engagement, and help them lead with adults. Adult organizers help youth work interdependently with people of diverse backgrounds, identities, and skill sets. Team builders create a leadership base of youth and adults committed to advancing the vision of the campaign.
Team builders, people, what stands out to you all about this particular description of a team builder?
This is Charlene. I love this definition, but that first line, understanding the needs of youth, is one of the things that jump out at me, because a lot of times we typically assume we do a lot of assumption in this game. We assume what young people need. We assume what they want, what they should be doing, and so that very first line about understanding the needs is very powerful.
That's good. And juxtaposing that with that assumption that we have. So many of those we broke down a little bit earlier, and that feeds into that adultist framework that we have about the world. That's good. Thank you, Charlotte. Somebody else, what stands out to you about building those teams?
Hey, Jeremy, one thing I wanted to say about team builders is that I think it's very important that we focus on assets and not deficits, because far too often we describe our youth, particularly our youth of color, from a deficit-based language instead of recognizing their assets, their strengths, their ambitions, their resourcefulness. And so if we're going to be effective team builders, we need to approach that from a asset-based language, not ignore barriers and things that are holding our youth back, but recognize that they have the assets, that they have the power to change, and we are allies in that work.
That's perfection. Thanks, Kevin. I love that. And we are allies in that work. Somebody else, is there another reaction to just the opening description of team builders?
For me, I think the base of youth and adults is really important, and them working interdependently. I think it goes back to what Yanalise said about how a lot of times youth are expected to conform to the working styles of adults. And in that they might be missing out on some of the strengths that they bring to the team. So making sure that while the youth are being challenged and working professionally, the adults too are recognizing those strengths and not just expecting them to conform to what already exists within an organization.
Come on, Rachel. Are we expecting young folks to conform? Right? I mean, when we do that work well, we recognize that there are so many systems we've created as adults that don't do well for adults or young people. And so it is a slap in the face to engage a young person and expect them to conform to a system that's already broken, right? What does that mean? Hey, come and do exactly what I did so that we can get the same results? Not at all. And so really, I love what you're saying, Rachel. How do we make sure we not only make room, but offer leadership to young folks who can even dismantle some of those systems that we've created for the well-being and the benefit of young folks and adults in the future? That's dope. Y'all are ready for this team building conversation for sure. So let's talk a little bit about this, y'all. So motivate members is the name of the game. When you're building teams with young people, you want to retain youth members by building rich relationships with them. Yanalise talked a lot about that earlier. The team builder's ultimate goal is to model organizing abilities for young people. The ultimate goal is to model it. Mia talked about being born into it. Even better, youth must trust the team builder and see them as a guide, one who can lead them strategically. So many times we're engaged in youth work and or campaign work, and we haven't figured out ourselves. It's going to be so critically important that we are demonstrating the type of capacity that young folks want to definitely emulate, and or allowing young people to demonstrate that, and so that we can follow behind their demonstration as well. Once you feel confident in their own leadership abilities, they will teach their peers. Teams built with leaders are more likely to build momentum, okay? So those are those truths around team builders. You wanna retain them with a rich relationship, okay? Model all the time what it is we should be doing, and then make sure young people recognize their own strengths, like we talked about with Kevin, their assets, so they can actually help other youth lead as well. let's look at some skill sets. And what I want you to think about is which of these skill sets you already have and do well, and which of these skill sets you want to do better. Communicating recent developments amongst campaign targets, allies, and strategies. We've learned, I think in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a really good example from the last presidential administration that things are changing quickly and that those developments need to be communicated quickly. We've learned through COVID the same exact thing. And so in order to really build an effective team, you're going to have to start communicating what's happening to that team so that you can begin to switch how it is you may be doing something. The next piece is coordinating trainings and capacity building opportunities for the teams. Capacity building is so critical, and really having that training base is going to be even more critical because those opportunities to learn your craft, to be able to teach what you've learned, apply it in real time, that's going to be really important. Managing internal and external conflicts is going to happen. It is natural. It is a part of the development of a team. When teams begin to trust each other, they begin to reveal even more about themselves and how they really feel. And those can create needed and healthy conflicts. We need folks who can actually manage those things as well, so that folks can understand that even though we've had a conflict, it doesn't mean that our team is broken. It means our team is identifying a place where we can keep on growing. Okay, so managing those internal and external conflicts is going to be critical. Delegating tasks and responsibilities to the appropriate leaders without bias. We talk about this a lot. When you're in the nonprofit sector or in a youth program, sometimes we pick on the same young people. Have you ever seen it? Have you ever done it before where that same young person, that nice person, Kevin, always says the right things, knows how to talk to the funders, right? And we just pick on them. They're the ones who gives the tour. They're the ones who get to manage the social media stuff. They're the ones who speak on the microphone. And what happens is we send the message to other young people that instead of them having inherent value, they should model themselves after another young person. And what I want to do is shift that a little bit. Right? Stop just picking the same young people to do the same things. What we want to do is leadership development. What that means is make those skill sets that are needed for the campaign known and help everybody adopt the same skill sets so that everybody understands where the growth points are. Everybody understands how they can get engaged in the content or in the initiative. We don't want to just select the same young people because we end up not using as much of the other young people, allowing them to lead as well. And then developing and dissolving teams to ensure the cause is victorious. Every now and again, a team builder has to be able to say, do we really need this team of folks? Do we need a team of people worried about mailing things out? Or can we just email it? Do we really need a team of people managing the social media accounts, or can we delegate that to one person? Do we really need this team for this or for that? And that team builder has to be able to say, listen, in order for us to accommodate what we need to accommodate, let's shift our teams a little bit. And never being married to a specific structure to the point where it kills the campaign. Right? There are a lot of folks, organizations, and teams who really need to revamp how they're doing what they're doing, but they're afraid to because they're married to it. They're in love with how they've always done it, and that's not going to work for long-term change. All right, so these are the skill sets of team builders. Hopefully you found some things you're good at. Hopefully you found some things you can work on well. The next thing I want to mention is developing team builders, creating teams, committee subgroups when needed. So this one is from the pedagogy of youth-adult partnerships. And I'm going to show you 4 different partnership frameworks that are oftentimes used. And I want to encourage you to use the last one for sure as well. There is an adult-controlled and tokenized youth partnership that oftentimes happens. The adults determine what the mission is. The adults create the website. The adults do everything, right? And maybe it's because of a grant, or maybe it's just because someone said it a week ago They invite maybe 1 or 2 young people, and they're just there. Those young people don't have any control. Their voices aren't really heard. They're there for the photo op. They may put them on the website, even put their name under the ledger for the board that they're on, but they're completely tokenized. And this is one of the worst models of youth adult partnerships because it's not a partnership. It is an opportunity for adults to look better and for young people to get passive involvement in something adults are truly controlling. And so in order for us to do that real work with young people, we have to make sure we're not tokenizing youth. Then there is adult-led, okay? A little bit different. Some organizations a lot of nonprofits are structured in this way, where there's the adults who are leading everything, and then the young folks give out input. They may go ask a young person, how do we do something differently or better? And they'll say, well, here's what you need to do. And the truth is, an adult-led organization can go, we like that information, or nah, we're not going to use it. And so they actually retain the power and they offer up input from young people whenever they feel like it, right? When we talk about youth adult partnerships, that also is not a partnership. It's truly adult-led, and it puts position, it actually wastes young people's time. When you give out a survey, asking for feedback, and you take the parts you like and you leave the parts you don't. When you put out something on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok and you get the responses and it is dead on arrival, right? All of these things that are happening, many times youth adult partnerships look a lot like this. Adults just trying to see what the youth is saying because it's cool or it's in. And the truth of the matter is they aren't honoring the leadership of young folks. Then there is actual youth adult partnerships. Usually both of those circles are equal in size, which means that the youth and the adults are making joint decisions. This can look a lot like there being an equal amount of youth and an equal amount of adults on a panel or in a working group to make sure that the representation is equal. This could also look like young people leading certain aspects and adults decided they're leading certain aspects, and they're clear on why the youth lead certain parts and why the adults lead certain parts, and they always talk to each other about that. And then the last one is youth-led. And so youth-led starts with the implementation, the planning, and the conceptualizing of all of these projects, and then the adults are supporting. And so young people may say, hey, adults, we need you to talk about this. Hey, do you know another adult who has the expertise in this? And so young people are definitely put in a position for themselves where they're leading it, and they know how to partner with adults in a way that allows the adults to add input or direction when necessary. Okay, so those are 4 things, and I want you all to think about, man, where are we in my organization and in my program? And be honest with yourself about it. Many folks rely, like I said before, in that adult-led youth input, and I want to encourage you all to really create those partnerships with young people. And so ways in which you can help young people actually be much more of a leader is recognizing they can do more than just talk, right? A lot of times we look at young folks and go, what do you think? Yeah, that's information, but there are some real things young folks can actually be doing, and in many ways they can teach us how to do as an adult, right? And so here's a laundry list of stuff that you could be having young folks doing much more often in your programs or in your organizations as well. And you're going to find this same list in your reflection journal after the training. Okay. But some of those things include scheduling those meetings, designing literature, taking notes, analyzing data, knocking on doors, educating stakeholders, meeting with new members, establishing partnerships, board participation, developing target profiles. All of these things young people can actually do. And it is the adultism in us that may have us saying, no, they can't do it, or no, I don't trust them to do it. And you actually should be thinking about ways in which you can help young people gain the skills to do this or improve on their skills to do this, and think about ways you can find out what skills they have and let them do it as well. Okay, So as you bring new supporters, you want to encourage them to continuously get more involved, right? And so this is just a quick framework for how that could look. One of the things folks talk about is, well, how do we make sure we're growing either young people and or adults in the organization? And so these are just examples. Maybe you're doing an initiative where you have to sign a petition. You may get some folks to sign it, and then maybe they move into attending the event, right? And so that signing the petition could be sharing something on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. That first step could be just really passive and them sharing information or engaging in it and then moving along. The next step is they may attend an event. Maybe you have an event in the community or online and you invite them, right? And you're starting to build that relationship. But then they consistently attend meetings and provide their input, right? They're not just showing up, but they're making their presence known in a way that can actually shift the way you're doing your work. Now they're volunteering for events. They're putting them on. They're calling some folks, right? And then they begin to coordinate the event. And now they're planning their own meetings and running actions. And then they're overseeing a major project, right? And so I don't want you to think that youth development is not a part of this team building. It is. And how you engage young people step by step should be intentional, right? We should be thinking critically about how we engage young people. And we should be thinking to ourselves, if they end up signing that petition or sharing that Facebook post, what's a way that we can follow up with them to attend an event? If they attend an event, how can we get their voices heard, right? When they start getting their voices heard, how can we gauge their interest in volunteering, right? Man, we've noticed when they volunteer, they're dope at this. What can we do to help them coordinate something, right? Plan those meetings. And then eventually, what is it going to take for them to oversee that project? We have to always be thinking, how do we get them more engaged, not just happy about how we engaged them the first time. Many times we're just happy at what we did do, but we aren't planning to actually engage them even more so they can eventually run everything that we're doing. All right. So those are some quick tips for how to build teams with young people. Now I want to turn it back over to our youth panelists. Here's the two questions I want y'all to answer. Why is it important for youth and adults to work together, serve their communities, and address social issues? And then lastly, what is your leadership role in the organizations you work with? And how do adults support you? All right. So the first question is, why is it important for adults to work together? And then what roles do you take as leaders in your organization?
For the first question, why is it important for youth and adults to work together to serve their communities and address social issues? As I said before, it also comes with that intergenerational learning. We can learn from each other, gain experience from one another. Also, we're all coming together to accomplish and complete one goal. So that's for that question. For question number two, what is your leadership role in the organization you work with? How do adults support you? Since I'm an intern at Urban, that's my position, along with two other peers of mine, our job or our role is we plan workshops. We also help plan events if we're planning events. Also those volunteer opportunities, as well as speak on panels and participate in media opportunities. And then how do adults support me? I feel like adults in Urban support me is just meeting me where I'm at. Many adults expect me to be on or have a certain expectation, but adults in Urban just meet me where I'm at.
That's good. Thank you, Mia. I appreciate that. And you mentioned something really important in meeting you where you are. What does that look like? A lot of times adults don't know if they're asking too many questions, have too many responsibilities that they're hoping young people have. How do they balance that with young people? Can you talk a little bit about how they meet you where you are?
I feel like listening, like even with experience, even if I may not have that much experience, they can help me get to the level where I'm able to just, for example, speak, make eye contact, like those type of things, like just starting at the base point and then taking those further steps.
Oh, that's powerful. So really recognizing where some of those growth points are for you and meeting you right where that is. That's good. Panelists.
I would say to having both youth and adults working together, is very important because just like Mia said, that's exactly what I was gonna say, is that one, I feel like it's important to be intergenerational with this work, for the simple fact that young people don't know everything. They know a lot, they know what they need, and they know what they want, but we just don't know everything. And I value older people's wisdom and knowledge, because it's just so important. Like older people, they lived through the civil rights era. That was not 100 years ago. They lived through the segregation. They lived through, all of these things that people act like it's over with. And one, it's important because, like I like to know what tactics did they use? How can we innovate those tactics? Because it is also a new era. And is like a part of like valuing older people's wisdom and knowledge. It's also important for adults to value young people's wisdom and knowledge, because they have a different perspective of this new society, of this new world. And it's important to address these social issues, because who's going to do it? Like who's gonna do it if it's not us? And it's like, also, I'm sorry, like I cannot rely on a white person to make change for me. I will never do that, because the level of urgency might not be the same, the level of impact might not be the same, all of that. And yeah, so again, I don't even know what that quote is, but it's basically said, if it's not us, then who? If it's not now, then when?
Yeah, that's it.
So I really, really take that serious, and we need to address these issues that affect all of us. And just like Mia said, we're here for one goal. And if we're always so disconnected, then that goal is not going to be reached. And it's not going to be reached at the pace that we want it to be reached, at the quality, or at the level that we want it to be reached. So yeah, that's why it's very important for youth and adults to work together, and to address these social issues. And again, like, we're the ones who know how this affects us, because we're the ones going through it. We can't expect other people that don't know what it is to be in our shoes to represent us, because that's just not, obviously that just hasn't worked in the past. And also representation does matter as well. And so when younger people, see older folks and young people coming together and actually working together, that will also help build this bridge that young people and adults have. Like, there's such a huge disconnect between youth and adults, and working together and ensuring that, one, like, adults are not doing that adultist thing that they always do, and actually respecting and listening to youth, and youth as well, valuing and gathering that wisdom and knowledge that older folks can provide. But for the second question, leadership role within LIT is I am a full-time youth organizer. And I have schools that I'm assigned to build chapters within these schools and help dismantle the school to prison pipeline district-wide, along with building leadership development within the youth to build capacity and people power, along with getting them engaged civically as well. Whether that's, even though youth cannot vote, youth definitely do have the influence to change or have the influence of the outcome of the elections. And a huge example is this past presidential election. The youth of Wisconsin specifically were the ones who had a huge impact in the outcome of the presidential election. And again, even though like a lot of the high schoolers that I work with can't vote themselves, that doesn't mean that they can't influence or encourage their family members to vote, their older folks to vote. That doesn't mean that they can't learn how to register other people to vote. That doesn't mean that they can't facilitate presentations on the importance of voting as well. So yeah, so that's basically my role within LIT and how the adults support me. I would say within my own organization, I would definitely give credit specifically to our executive director, Dakota Hall, and our high school organizing director, Cindy. They have supported me throughout my development every way possible. I obviously don't know everything and didn't know anything or a lot when I came straight out of high school. I didn't know anything about organizing. I didn't even know that, this was an actual position. I thought people made things on their free time. But yeah, so they definitely have supported me in every way possible. And aside from the organization on how adults throughout the community support me is just supporting the work that we do, supporting our youth, and just showing up when we absolutely need them. So
That's good. Both of y'all talked a lot about, Yanalise and Mia, about being developed and wanting to be developed, right? Sometimes this is something that young folks don't want the help of adults, or they don't want to listen to adults. And y'all are saying, no, that's exactly not true. You want those skill sets and you want your assets to be really expanded on as well. And then Annalise, you even talked about that youth adult partnership, and you call it intergenerational, and how much you appreciate it, right? And that's beautiful because many times adults feel like they don't fit or they can't engage young people. And y'all are saying, no, that's not true. Those intergenerational conversations and the intergenerational work is critical to the work that we're all doing. Thanks y'all for sharing on that. Are there any comments or questions from anybody else for our panelists? Oh, Raylet already came in. Okay. So Raylet says, how can the youth help older adults learn how to communicate better or compromise? All right, panelists, how can these adults communicate better and do more compromising?
I guess it just comes with that relationship building. It's better when you have a relationship with that certain adult that that adult is able to express how they feel and be able to communicate how they feel. So I think it just comes with that bond and with that relationship that adults and youth are able to communicate and compromise better.
Mia, do you oftentimes feel like adults do kind of typical things where it messes up the communication and they may not realize like, oh yeah, that's a really bad communication thing that adults do? Do you have an example of something like that?
Not anything that I can think of right now.
Okay. No problem. Yanalise, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess this is a pretty thoughtful question. Aside from building those relationships, which again are key, I would say I kind of have trouble answering this for the fact that one, us young people are the product of our older generations. So the fact that a lot of us really don't know how to properly communicate really stems off of our older generations. We're adapting and learning what our older generations has taught us. I don't really know how young people can teach older folks how to communicate when we weren't really taught that ourselves, which is why I'm having trouble really answering this. But I would say psychology really has a big factor in that. Really just understanding, trying your best to understand, trying your best to limit these adultist actions or views. Because once that is limited and the relationship is established, I promise you communication will be just fine. There's students that I probably haven't hit up in a long time, but as soon as I call them, they'll answer. But yeah, really, again, like I would say, I don't think youth can. I don't really know that. Again, that's a hard question. I would just say our adults can do their own thing to educate yourselves and learn what adultism is and learn how to limit that and really build relationships. And I feel like the communication will be just fine.
That's perfect. A lot of what I hear y'all saying is like adults got to do their work, right? Don't look to you to figure out how we can better communicate with you. Let us do that work and show up as better communicators as well. Hey, I appreciate it. All right, so I have another question from, I believe it's Emily. How do you deal with the issues and tensions that you experience when working with adults? They really underestimate your abilities. How do you deal with that? Panelists are just thinking about it for a moment.
In my personal experience, I would say that 9 times out of 10, again, I'm speaking from my personal experience, the people who have like not underestimated me knowing that I'm young are typically people that are more self-aware. They're more open-minded. They're more educated. They're more wise. So those are typically the people that I have to build relationships with. But I usually run into those problems when it comes to people that are really not making an impact on my work. Like secretaries, security, maybe a random teacher. And it's like in our reality, like if I'm putting them on a power map, they're really not important for me to reach my goal. So I really don't care, to be honest. But if it comes to a situation where they are like, I did have one situation where there was just this older 60-year-old white woman that really just had it in for me, no idea why. But because of the relationships that I had built with the principal, with the parent coordinator, and with other adults who know better, they were able to defend me without me even saying a word, without knowing that I knew that she was trying to come for me. So to really answer that question, I don't pay no mind to it because 9 times out of 10, the people that are doing that are very irrelevant to my work. So, yeah.
That's good. Mia, did you want to add to that at all?
Yes, definitely agree. But also like how I deal with it, I would have to go to like a mentor of mine, like just somebody that I trust and somebody that I do have a relationship with, just to ask for advice on how to go about and how to deal with that situation.
That's good. Yeah, those mentors are critical. And Annalise kind of mentioned that too. Those safe places with adults who know how to have your back. And sometimes just intervening those microaggressive interactions between you and another adult who doesn't get it, maybe doesn't have any training, doesn't value young people. And then also, it could be helping potentially, if you go to a mentor, saying, here, this is what I would do, or here's what I hope you could do next as well. That's dope. It really feeds into that need that y'all talked about, which is we got to be intergenerational. But in order to do that well, adults first have to show up prepared with how to engage the next generation as well. That's good. All right, y'all. Y'all drop the gems continually. Is there any other questions or comments from anybody in the audience? You can speak through your microphone or you can put it in the chat box. I'm going to give you a moment to ask a few more questions. And we're still talking about building those teams with the young folks and adults.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. In light of all of the social justice issues that's been going on, are you seeing a lot of trauma or stress amongst your peers or yourselves? And if so, what is the solution, or how are you, how is that being handled? Is there a way that if you're seeing peers go through it, do you have the resources, etc.?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of trauma and just a lot of passed down trauma, even like just seeing the news of police brutality and just, a lot of people of color and specifically Black people like live in fear of their skin color and of being stopped by the police every day. So I think there is a certain trauma that comes with that, and just seeing a lot of people die due to police brutality. So if I do see someone, specifically me, I've just been trying to maintain it, try to feed into some positivity. Even if that's just making people aware, posting on my social media about it, educating people, even though it's not really my job, like to educate people like on racism and things like that, but it is to inform others on the impact that it has on us. So yes, to your other question about the resources, if I do see someone in need of those resources, I have adults who have like resources, mental health resources that can connect me to those young
That's
people
dope.
who need those resources.
So yeah, you're already connected to that mental health resources as well, Mia. That's cool. That's cool. Thank you.
So yeah, basically, yeah, it has been a very, very tough year for young people. Definitely a lot of just things going on, a lot of different things. Especially, with the social justice issues along with the pandemic going on and just the financial state that a lot of our youth are in. Like a lot of youth that I know had to pick up jobs or had to help babysit their siblings or had to pick up on extra things because of the situations that had arise, along with dealing with everything that's been going on with the social justice issues. So the one thing I would say as far as resources is that that's a big reason as to why we advocate for mental health resources, what more funding for mental health resources to MPS. Like that's always, with or without pandemic, mental health has always been a priority for our youth. And that has been a priority for our organization as well. So last year when the uprising started happening in the protests, and then specifically after the situation with George Floyd, and when Minneapolis had cut their ties, the university had cut their ties with the police department. We were already working on that, coincidentally, when all of that was going on. And we were already advocating for MPS to cutting the contracts with Milwaukee Police Department. But they were not going at all. They were like, no, we're gonna have problems. No, like they were not going whatsoever. And initially they only had divested $100,000 from the contract when the whole thing eliminated. Again, because they were more worried about what the police department was gonna think or say or do. That because MPS was giving MPD over $500,000 every single school year. But again, coincidentally, when everything was happening with the uprisings and Minneapolis cut their ties with the MPD, we were able to use that and pressure the board to vote all unanimously to cut the contract with MPD. So since that was passed, all those $500,000 were invested into the mental health of youth. So there was more counselors. Counselors hired more nurses because they were also trying to cut nurses in the middle of a pandemic. More restorative justice practice coordinators district wide. So MPS can start looking into alternatives other than punitive or harsh measures for our students. And yeah, that's just been ways on how we've been trying to gather those resources, because I personally can't provide that myself. But with the work that we're doing is how we're trying to provide that on a systemic level.
Annalise, you pull us right into, this panelist is really good at that, and pulling us right into the next piece when you talk about that divesting and that policing and really investing in that youth and mental health in schools for counselors and stuff. That's a perfect example about how to really build a strategy and how oftentimes those strategies take years, right? You mentioned pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, y'all are completely invested and consistently working toward that mental health and well-being of young people. I love that, right? A lot of times we saw, even with Black Lives Matter in the last 2 years, there's a lot of organizations who are kind of jumping on the bandwagon. And it's cool, it looks good, they got all these beautifully well-written statements, right? But then they don't know what to do after that. They don't actually have the strategy or potentially even a team. They just may be becoming a member of the base of people. And they don't even know this, right? They'd elect to be a part of that base of folks who say, yes, we support Black Lives Matter, right? But what I hear you all saying is, you gotta go more than that, right? Your caring doesn't matter if it doesn't produce an outcome of change for folks who are impacted, right? And so I love that. When we talk about strategy builders, we're talking about those kind of folks who can turn a member into someone who is helping to facilitate real strategies that affect real change. So I'm going to read that description of strategy builders. Strategy builders have the capacity to engage youth when choosing between strategies with clarity and direction to ensure tactics are implemented successfully. These organizers implement calculated tactics and strategies that lead to tangible victories. Their goal is to exploit the gaps in their opposition and embolden the assets of the oppressed. When youth achieve incremental victories, they are more likely to commit long term. And so those incremental victories are going to be just as critical as those larger ones. Did anybody want to speak to what stands out to them about what it means to be a strategy builder? All right, it must be well said. It's definitely pretty obvious there. I want to go through a few of those builder and what their momentum is. Strategy builders identify opportunities to make the opponent change their mind and actions. Y'all, this is bigger than talking about what should people be saying or learning. We're talking about change thinking and change behavior. That's the real outcome here. They use information, research, and data at the right time to determine when, how, and where to act to ensure they meet campaign needs. And strategic builders include 5 components. They analyze, identify, determine, align, and develop. Okay, so those are some of those things. If you're thinking, I don't know, Jeremy, am I a strategy builder? Let's talk about some of those skill sets that needs to be there. To be a strategy builder, you got to formalize campaign action plans with youth ideas and leadership. Formalizing those action plans with the ideas and the leadership. Partner with campaign allies representing multiple organizations, not thinking we can do this by ourselves. And one of the panelists talked about it earlier, but really thinking, how can we do this as a part of a collective? Devising short-term and long-term tactics against campaign opponents, persuading politicians or funders or decision makers, however you can, to act or respond to youth demands, and processing decisions quickly, changing direction suddenly, right? And our young folks already talked about having that experience. When we talk about who are potential allies, folks are more likely to support you if they are personally affected by the issue, benefit from the solution, think the cause can make life better for lots of other people, can share the message, believe in the strategy, and support similar issues. Okay, so that goes into a little bit of our target mapping and identifying who cares about this and how can they benefit. The next thing I want to talk about is, and you're going to get this in your reflection journals, so we won't go deep into this, but Jan Lees talked about it a little bit earlier, that power analysis. And in the most simplistic form, looking at your constituents, the people who are actually negatively affected by it, they're your core group, and they have the most to win. And the broader and more diverse your leadership team, the more skills and resources you have to draw for your campaign. And so you want to think about, who are our constituents, those people who can benefit from this thing and are impacted by the issue. You also want to think about, who are our allies, those organizations that will literally support us, right? It may be other leaders or bloggers or whoever they may be. And even there may even be some unexpected allies, people who are helpful because they can open the minds of your supporters. So those allies and constituents, the people who want to do it with you, the people who will be impacted by it, and then obviously your targets, those folks who you actually want to see that behavior change happen to. Okay, so more of that content will definitely be in your reflection journals. But I want to just impress upon you that these things, that organizing doesn't happen by happenstance. People aren't just randomly doing it, as Yana-Lisa and Mia said. No, people really do know who their targets are. They're identifying specific folks in organizations who can make change. They know who their allies are. Those people who are saying, yep, we're going to help you. And the closer they are to that target, even better. And they know the folks that plan to impact as well. And then lastly, all of these things go together into a continuum as well. They really go together into this chart, which really breaks down. Listen, once you have your demand, you can actually target the folks that can help you get those demands met. You look at your current resources. What is your sphere of influence? Who can impact it? How much money do you have? What can your leaders do? You look at your supporters. Who are those allies that are behind you? And then with all of those things in mind, you develop a tactic, okay? All of those things go together. And in your reflection journal, you get a greater chance to look at how those things can really come together for you. But it's important to recognize as strategy builders, you're thinking long-term, you're thinking strategically, right? And you're committed to that, as Yana-Lisa and Mia said, to actually seeing something change. And so campaigns, initiatives, whatever they may be, they take time. And they take some real commitment on behalf of adults and young folks to think in these ways together. So I want to turn it back to those youth panelists. These are going to be our last set of questions, and we're going to end this off with y'all's voices. How can youth and adults contribute to causes they care about? You know, sometimes folks always think about marching in a campaign. That's not the only way to contribute, right? What are some other ways? And then what strategies have you used to create change for your community? Yana-Lisa, Mia, it's back to you.
I would say, how can youth and adults contribute to causes they care about? Collaboration, that's a huge part of it. Collaborating with other organizations, even schools, even just getting to know other students and adults. Also, knowing what's out there. So how can youth find ways to know what's out there and find ways on who's doing what and what's going on. Donating is another one. Like,
oh, that's a good idea.
Organizations need money to be able to support the interest in the youth. Also, like you said, Jeremy, it doesn't have to be big or anything like that. It could be on a small scale. Even writing a post on social media, doing something in your neighborhood, creating a TikTok, just doing something small scale. It doesn't have to be big. For number 2, what strategies have you used to create change in your community? Educating others on the topics that I care about. So informing them on the topics that I care about, because they can't care, as I said before, they can't care if they don't know what it's about and what the impact it has on me and possibly them. And using my voice, I think my voice is, even youth voice in general, we are the future, as people say, but just voices, our youth voices need to be heard specifically, but just using my voice and collaborating with others. Like, for example, I'm a part of student government at Rufus King, so just reaching out to them, see what they want, or as far as causes, reaching out to the members in Urban Underground, even Lit, just collaborating with other organizations.
Man, Mia, a big part of what you're saying is that collaboration is key. Yes. And it should not be undervalued as well. I love that. All right, Yana-Lisa, how would you answer those questions?
So I would say specifically for youth, on how the youth can contribute to the causes that they care about is, I would say literally just letting your voice be heard, letting your experiences be heard, because that, as far as with Lit, we take we take care of everything else, and you know, if you're not at that, you're not comfortable enough to make certain decisions within Lit and stuff like that, we at least would want your experience to be heard and just be voiced, for the simple fact that youth really doesn't have the platform to speak to adults with decision-making power. So like, all I ever ask is for you to make your experiences and voices be heard, because that's how change can happen. You know, like if you really perfect storytelling and you impact someone enough to make a change, that's what really counts. So what's it called? And adults can contribute, just like Mia said, donation. Y'all could donate to Lit. Right there. Donate is on the corner. The other ways that that adults can help is just really being there and being supportive to the youth, letting youth, speak for themselves, trusting youth. That's a big thing. And having expectations for youth as well, because quite frankly, like the whole thing, No Child Left Behind Act that had happened within the school system. I don't know if everyone's aware of that or not, but that actually created more harm than good to our communities, because people were like, oh, we're just gonna pass them no matter what. But that again, that did more harm than good. So I personally feel like adults in general just adapted that mindset. I myself had heard with my own ears a teacher say, oh, I thought I was helping this Black child by not giving him tests, by giving him easier work, which again is doing more harm than good. So yeah, just being a support to youth, and not being I would say being a support to youth and trying to cut out those adultist perspectives, views, or anything like that. And strategies that we've used to create change in our communities is really, again, civic engagement, leadership development, and advocacy has been our three biggest strategies. So yeah, I don't really know if you
that's good. Leader engagement and advocacy. Thank you, Annalise. I appreciate that. You spoke a lot about that leadership engagement and that advocacy and the importance of doing that. And you referenced those historical moments, like No Youth Left Behind, right? And how the assumption is, oh, let's pass them along. I don't know what school of thought that came from. I don't know how they came up with that one. But for some reason, somebody thought it was a really good idea to just pass folks along. But to your point, what it didn't do was actually look at ways in which teachers could teach differently in order to be more culturally appropriate, ways in which schools can structure themselves differently to accommodate different learning styles and needs of young people. And many times what ends up happening is we want people to change instead of the systems to change. And so we create policies that in turn be like, listen, instead of us taking accountability for our inability to effectively do the work, we're just going to make it easier on ourselves, right? And so sometimes it happens all the time. We even see another example that even with the presidency and Kamala Harris saying that America isn't a racist country, right? And so when we talk about the tactics that are used to either silence the voices of those who are speaking or disregard the lived experiences of those who live in America, people oftentimes blatantly deny the lived realities for their own gain. And what you all talk to about is recognizing when that happens and then still lifting up your voices to ensure that even though that may be the framework they're pushing, the truth still comes through. Because when we address it and we call it out for what it actually is, we have a better chance of fixing it and making sure we're living in a better world. So thank y'all for talking to us. I'm going to open y'all up to the panelists before we get out of here. We got about 7 more minutes. So I'm going to give about 5 minutes. Are there any questions you all have to our panelists before we close out today?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say awesome job, you two. Just again, and Jeremy, thank you so much for coordinating such an amazing discussion. It's so important that we put young people in the forefront to allow their voices to be heard. So you two amazing young people did just a spectacular job. Thank you so much for your work and your continued passion for the work.
That's what's up. Thanks, Charles, and thank you to the panelists as well. Anybody else as we close out have any questions or comments?
Hi, Jeremy. I just want to reiterate what Charlene just mentioned. Great job. The panelists, you are phenomenal. And you gave that shout out to Lit. So I hope I say your name right. Yaniles. I just put $100 donation in on Lit. Mia, do you have one you need me to donate to? Drop it in there so I can make that donation as well. Thank you.
Thank you,
Raylet.
And I've just been listening. This is Tracy. You guys are phenomenal. I'm so excited to see. I feel like my future is in good hands now. And so I'm excited. Jeremy, great job, sir. I'm proud of you all. And it's just thank you for the opportunity allow me to listen. Thanks, Charlene, for that last minute connection. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you for being here. Anybody else? Comments, questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. This has been absolutely awesome. I hope you all, it sounds like you all got a lot from our youth panelists and even a little bit of the conversation moving forward in between them talking. This is the learning panel model that I find works really well so that everybody can get a little bit of something from everything happening today. Moving forward, we're going to share out next week the application video and the reflection journal. It just really takes this information and says, here's how you can use it personally and in your organizations as well. So thank you all so much. Our last 2 trainings come up next month. On the 14th, we'll have Black women talking about the adultification. That'll be another panel. It's going to be good. There are women who represent a lot of different backgrounds, and they'll be talking about how it's been to receive so many messages that adultify them even from a younger age. So please, those of you all who have registered will get access to that training. That's on the 14th. And the last Friday of this month is going to be called From Actors to Accomplices. So we'll be taking a review of everything we've learned since October, I believe, and we'll be actually applying it and thinking about what are ways we can actually become accomplices and move along that continuum so that we can do this work even more. So thank you all for joining us and staying with us this whole entire time. And look out for some emails. And also next month, join us for our last 2 trainings. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Jeremy, for the opportunity.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, panelists, for coming. We really appreciate you coming today, and we look forward to everybody coming to the sessions in May.
Thank you.